Mark my words, Joan Prime is going to be one of the top open field commanders in Rise of Kingdoms. And in this video, I'm going to help you pick out the very best pairings so that you can enjoy her on the battlefield. Hello my friends and welcome back. I'm Chisgule Gaming and today's video is sponsored by the makers of Rise of Kingdoms. And I want to help you pick out the very best and worst Joan Prime pairings so that you can enjoy her on the battlefield when she arrives in the Wheel of Fortune. So in this video, I'm going to go over what I think some of the very best pairings are, and I will be comprehensive in reviewing some of the ones I think that are maybe less exceptional. I'll give you some talents because I think there's one very obvious talent build for Joan Prime, and I'll even help try to prioritize her relative to the other commanders that you could invest in. So let's get this thing started, and in order to talk about the pairings, we need to just very briefly review her kit so that we're all on the same page for what she does, because she's really here to be a damage dealer. Not really a buffer, even though that's what she does. Not really a lot of tankiness, because she really doesn't do that. She's a cavalry commander, and she's doing lots of damage. So how does that work? Her active skill has an area of effect doing 2,000 damage factor. You'll love to see 3 targets, 2,000 damage factor. That's a good number. She also gives a buff to her march and only 2 other nearby friendly marches, increasing your damage by 5% and giving 20 rage per second. 20 rage per second's not nothing. It's a small amount, though. It's slightly more than the legendary Horn of Fury, triggering once, and it's spread out over 3 seconds, which is fine. The 5% damage boost is fine. It's nothing too insane. She's not really about buffing like the original Joan was. If we look at the next skill, 20% attack, 20% march speed, some of it you need to be out of territory in order to get that, and 5% normal attack damage. Again, nothing too remarkable here, other than the fact that there's no defensive stats really. P.S. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, I've got over 1,700 videos dedicated to making you a better player in the game, and I release tons of commander guides, so consider subscribing. In the third skill, we've got cavalry units led by this commander dealing 5% more damage when attacking troops. Joan Prime is not going to be amazing, I think, for swarming garrisons. I know there's not a lot of people that really should be thinking about that, but she's not a premium commander for a garrison swarm, not like Henry is. And in addition, this skill makes it so that when using skills, troops led by this commander gain a buff that increases normal attack damage dealt by 30% for 1 second. So a nice little boost of damage when you use skills. It can only trigger once every 5 seconds, but you do want to use skills really frequently on this commander, in part because of this skill, and in part because of the next one, making it so that cavalry units on the map have 10% health. This was that like teeny, tiny, itty-bitty amount of tankiness that I was describing earlier here. And when she's the secondary commander, when the troop uses an active skill, there's a 100% chance to cast Sacred Banner. Now, I've talked in depth on how I think this works, so I won't rehash all of that here. What I will simply say is that getting extra skill damage and using the active skill all over again is really, really powerful. The expertise skill here, troops led by this commander deal 5% more counterattack damage. That's not really all that significant. And when the target troop has more than 30% of units remaining, troops led by this commander deal 5% more damage. Look, 5% more damage isn't that big of a deal, but it's just like one more reason where they're like, here, use this commander in the open field. It's not really quite as good. It's not fully kitted out for swarming a garrison. Now, counter-rallying is a different story, but even then, the counter-rally is likely to be less than 30% while it's getting reinforced. So it just isn't that big of a deal. The expertise skill on this commander actually is not all that important. So if you really wanted, you could use this commander without the expertise skill, and she will do very well. You will have nearly none of the tankiness, however, assuming that you don't have this last skill maxed out. You'll only end up with 2% of health per point that you get in here. And this is all very important to understand with regard to how you might pair Joan Prime. She is a bit of a glass cannon. All she has is the 10% health. So when we look at the pairings, we're going to look for other commanders that are more tanky. And I will say the only saving grace for the lack of tankiness in her kit is the fact that she can use the support tree and you can have her as the primary. That does have good damage mitigation. And the fact that cavalry equipment is absolutely loaded with health if you go that route. So I've made dedicated videos about all of this sort of equipment, but just to highlight for a moment the sort of thing that you can do: health on the chest, health on the legs, health on the boots, health on the gloves. Helmet has defense. You can even use the epic weapon for more defense. And that is a lot of tanky stats. Not every single troop type has the option to kit out so defensively with equipment. And if you're using Joan Prime, you really should be looking to move in the direction of a budget version, at least, of a very tanky set of equipment. There's really two commanders that I think are the very top tier. Maybe we could throw three in there for Joan Prime pairings. And I'm not going to talk about, like, if you're bringing a full murder ball, who do you pair with who? And I'm just saying, if you're talking about the best Cav marches in the game with Joan Prime, what might they be? And I think that Nevsky paired with Joan Prime is going to be the freaking jam. And I think you actually want the Joan to be the primary. So you want Joan followed by Nevsky. Why is that? Joan does that big damage. She's then going to boost your damage. And Nevsky does even more skill damage than Joan does. Now, it's single target, but that's a big hit. But there's more. When troops led by this commander consist of only cavalry, skill damage is increased by 25%, and skill damage is increased by an extra 35% for 4 seconds after casting an active skill. Hello, that's amazing. So the way that I think this works is if you use Joan as the primary, not only do you get the better, more tanky talents of Joan Prime from the support tree, but she will use the active skill, doing AoE damage. There will be a second of downtime. That will be the first second in which Knight of Iron is active. Remember, this is active for 4 total seconds. Okay? Then Nevsky does his active skill, so he is going to do a ton of damage. So whether you're fighting a bunch of enemies or a single enemy, you're going to do so much damage to them. Okay? Then there is still a second of downtime, and while you still have this buff, you will get the trigger of Sacred Banner hitting that extra time with her AoE and doing just a ton of extra skill damage. Now, I suppose theoretically, if you wanted to optimize that skill damage boost around doing area of effect damage, then you could use the Nevsky primary. But I'll talk later about talents and why I think Joan as the primary is probably a really solid choice. Now, Nevsky's kit overall is absolutely amazing. I don't think I have to review this to you, but I'll just remind you that it's got this extra tankiness. A chance to gain 30% health is just really insane. He also is just really tanky, 20% defense. He's got 20% health as well. I mean, I think that the best pairing you can make with Joan is Nevsky for a pure cavalry march with only cavalry commanders. This, to me, I think makes the most sense. Now, I'm not saying that you couldn't do some really cool stuff with XY Joan, which is the next pair I want to talk about, and is a pair I might end up using. I just want to mention that the power level of Nevsky is so high, the power level of Joan is so high, I think it's pretty safe to say most people would even agree that Nevsky is the better cavalry commander between XY and Nevsky, but putting them together seems pretty logical, and calling that the best, it feels pretty safe. But let's talk about the XY Joan pair. I covered this in depth in one of my other videos, but the long and short of it is that getting your skill cycles shorter is really good with Joan Prime, because you'll just get more activations of her extra use of her active skill. That's more buffs, that's more damage, and that is amazing. So XY has a reduced rage requirement, which you love to see, but he doesn't have any tankiness at all. So if you use the sort of XY Joan combo, the only way you're going to get more tankiness on this march is not really from talents. It's only really coming from your equipment. So this feels like a glass cannon march that could be very powerful. I really want to try it, and I really want to see. But I am a little afraid for what happens if it gets focused down. I think it's going to be among the best, but I just worry for it a little bit in terms of its survivability. For those of you that are really old school and were using XY with William back in the day, you know exactly what I'm talking about. That march was so squishy that I remember Legend Ronnie was saying at one point he regretted his investment in XY because it just was really, really vulnerable. Now, there is one non-cavalry pairing that I think it's just of course going to be very good. And I've got to switch it up here and take the filter off the cavalry commanders and show you the leadership commanders. This is a commander I've talked about a lot. It's Honda Tadakatsu. Now, Honda does several things that works well with Joan, and I'll just mention it briefly because I've covered this in so many videos. Honda Tadakatsu buffers the damage you take. He reduces the normal attack damage you take. He slightly reduces all damage that you take. But what's more important is that as you get lower and lower on your troop count, he elevates the skill damage that you deal. And Joan of Arc Prime is getting an extra AoE skill attack. So this seems like a really great pairing. I mean, with Honda Tadakatsu, your best pairings I would think are going to be with Joan and Honda. You could use XY with Honda, and I've really enjoyed Skippy with Honda, and that's just to name a few. He's extremely versatile. And although most people don't actually have Honda Tadakatsu, I've got great news for you. There's another commander you almost certainly do have in a decent state, and that's Mehmed. And I think that Joan Prime with Mehmed, with the museum buff, is going to be good. It's good not only because Mehmed brings 20% health, you'll love to see that, considering Joan doesn't have the tanky stats, but also he boosts skill damage. So that's actually a deceptively good pairing, better than you might normally see. So I think that Joan Prime, especially with the support tree, you put some tanky equipment on there, pair with Mehmed, is going to be really good. Not as good as Honda would be, but still really good and far more accessible. I do think there's probably some cute but not good stuff that you can do with Julius Caesar as well. I've proven this in a number of videos, and if you want to see when I've done that for other commanders and tested that specifically, I'll have a card up in the top. You'll be able to see that Julius Caesar on his active skill, boosting your damage by 30% and your attack by 20% for 5 seconds is going to be insane when you get that extra attack with Joan of Arc Prime. Yes, I think that's going to work out really, really well. But a leadership primary for a pairing is a little bit weird, and Joan Caesar is a little bit weird with all cavalry. I'm just saying, though, it's probably going to do better than you would expect, but is not one of the top tier pairings. This brings us back to cavalry combos, and I'm going to say that I don't like the Attila combo. Attila reduces the skill damage you deal. That is not where you want to be. So I would say this is a no-go pairing with Attila. William is a combo I actually want to try, and this is a little bit of a glass cannon march. However, the reason I think that Joan William would be something you'd be interested in is that those are two very high power level commanders. They do generate a lot of rage, and if you're using a commander like XY and Nevsky already together, you might not want to split up that combo. That combo is so damn good for swarming garrisons. I personally may keep it together. And so the Joan with William, I think, will do great. You're going to do a lot of skill damage. You're going to generate a lot of rage. And at least you can potentially, just for some amount of the time, get 20% extra defense from William. It's not amazing, but I think this is a combo that's solid. And I think that the support tree will deliver the value you're looking for tankiness and also pairing nicely with William. Now from here, and on the topic of the support tree, I really like the Saladin pairing. I don't think it's top tier because I think that top tier is far more aggressive with the damage that you can deal. But I think that Saladin paired with Joan is pretty solid. And you could make an argument that you might want to hide Joan behind Saladin. I think probably the stronger play, especially from the standpoint of maximizing your Joan Prime buffs, is just going to be Joan primary, Saladin secondary. And I think that will do really well. And I think this idea, this mindset of pairing a more tanky commander with a more punchy commander to make all your marches more survivable is generally pretty reasonable. Saladin reduces counterattack damage taken. He gives you some defense. I mean, it's very reasonable. Oh, and he also reduces skill damage taken. That's actually perhaps more important. So the Saladin pairing with Joan Prime, I think is going to be great. There's a couple cavalry commanders here I want to touch on, but I don't think they're worth talking about a lot. The first one is Jadwiga. I don't think she's that great in the open field. And I think she's a great garrison captain, but the kinds of players that are investing in Jad and a garrison captain probably have better options for the open field anyways. So I don't think that there's anything special happening with the synergy of Joan Prime that would make you say, I'm going to take Jad off the bench and use her in the field. I don't think so. I think that Double C is a fine pairing, but not great. I think you probably have better options. And the same is sort of true for Khan. Now you might think, wait a minute. Khan could be good, couldn't he? He reduces the rage requirement. What are you talking about? But Khan, when he's expertised, also has an extra attack mechanic. And there's weirdness here with these extra attacks because every time you get an extra attack, you delay your next active skill by 1 second. Remember, the way that active skills work in the game is that they fire off, and then there's basically like a second of downtime. Really, perhaps the more appropriate way of thinking about it is that an active skill takes a second to load up. And that time for loading up an active skill to get fired off again cannot start until your previous active skill is finished. So here's what happens if you pair Khan with Joan. And I talked about this a little bit the other day more in depth in my live stream, so I'll have a card up in the top if you want to see that full stream, which was a very entertaining stream. But what I think happens if both Khan and Joan get their extra skill to proc is that Khan will use an active skill. There's a second of downtime. Joan would use her active skill. There would be a second of downtime. The Khan extra attack would fire. There would be a second of downtime. The Joan skill would fire. And before you could get another active skill, remember, there's still another second of downtime. So that's 8 seconds. So 9 seconds later, you could have Khan fire off an active skill again. I think that if you ran the Khan with Joan Prime combo, you would run maybe a not trivial amount into the situation where you're actually delaying your skill cycles because you have too many extra active skills. I know that seems really weird, but I think that's how that would work out. I don't think this would be a good combo. Khan is not that good of a commander to begin with, so trying to elevate him here, unfortunately, I just think Joan is not the play. But a commander that I do think is sneakily going to be extremely good with a Joan primary is going to be Takeda. Now, this is not a commander I think like, oh man, go out of your way to invest in Takeda. No. But if you have Takeda, and you're like, man, I'm trying to make another Cav March, and I've got this new Joan Prime to play with, this could be really decent. The reason I say that is Takeda is just like 80% of stats, if I recall, 40% attack, 40% defense. It has healing. It reduces normal attack damage taken and skill damage taken. The only downside is that he's kind of boosting your normal attacks, but so does Joan Prime, by the way. So I think you could do some pretty funky stuff with Joan Takeda. Another commander that could get a nice little revival is Chandragupta. Now, Chandragupta paired with Joan could work because he boosts all damage dealt by 40% for 3 seconds. However, this is on his active skill, which means I don't think that Joan's boost to all damage will stack with this one. So that's kind of a little bit of a bummer, but I do think that putting together Chandragupta and Joan could be pretty solid, if for no other reason than like you boost your all damage by 40% and then you hit with a big AoE. You could use the Joan primary because the support tree's that damn good. You could use Chandragupta primary because you want to immediately boost Joan's active skill, even if she's not getting the extra attack with her active skill. And I think all of that is super reasonable. I like Chandragupta more and more. And that's in part, by the way, because he's very good for swarming garrisons. When attacking cities or strongholds, troops led by this commander take reduced damage. I have noticed that fewer and fewer commanders are entering the game with these sorts of kits that really work extremely well for swarming garrisons. Just look at Joan Prime. It's not that great for swarming a garrison. So commanders like Chandragupta are deceptively strong, and I think Joan will be right at home with Chandragupta. The last commander I think we need to talk about here is Bert. And Bert, I think, is just okay in the open field. I really just think he's okay. He's got one skill committed to battling garrisons specifically, and he's got another skill that requires you to be right next to your target. He does have some tankiness, but I don't think he has as many stats and as much tankiness as Takeda does. So he's like fine, but I actually think in some ways that Takeda might be better. He does have some reactive skill damage dealt, but I don't think Bert is where you want to be for this pairing either. So to summarize the very best Joan pairings, I think you're really looking at Nevsky, XY, maybe William. I think Saladin will do fine. I think that Takeda will do fine. I think Chandragupta will be fine. And one other commander I almost forgot is Minamoto. And I think Minamoto will also do great. The reason that I like Minamoto paired with Joan is that he's got some defense on his museum buff. The reason I don't like Minamoto paired with Joan is that both of them are looking for a little bit more of an amplifier, somebody who will enhance their skill damage or the speed with which they use their active skills. And the downside with this pairing is that there are better commanders for amplifying your skill damage. Nevsky enhances skill damage. Honda Tadakatsu enhances skill damage. XY gives you faster rage cycles. Even William is giving you faster rage cycles by helping you generate more rage. And although Joan herself generates rage, 20 rage per second is just not that insane. It's good, but just like temper your expectations for how noticeable that's going to be. So I think that Mina with Joan is fine. Joan primary is the way I would run that. And that is because I really like her talents, and that's what we need to talk about. I think that this is probably the one build you use with Joan Prime, and I'll have to do a little bit more investigation to where you put maybe a point here or a point there. But this is going to be really solid. Why is that? First of all, Rejuvenate you have to get. But the support tree Rejuvenate generates more rage than the skill tree Rejuvenate. And the reason I've only put 2 points into here is because of a very complex topic around the way that rage limitations work. I won't explain it in depth here. I will simply say that courtesy of Wick Gaming, we're now much more aware of a rage per turn limit of 220. I've made very detailed videos about that, so I'll have a card up in the top where you can see more information about this rage mechanic and the limits to rage per turn at 220. But in general, from normal attacks and counterattacks, you're pulling in like 100 rage a turn, plus you're going to be getting sometimes 20 from Joan of Arc, plus another 100 with only 2 points required in this skill over here. The third point in Rejuvenate is actually just straight wasted. And even if you're, by the way, having your rage reduced, that doesn't apply for this situation. Rage reductions apply after all rage gained has been tabulated. So you're capped at 220, and then later, reductions happen. So even if you're like, oh, but someone might reduce your rage, it doesn't help getting extra rage here. So 2 points over here. Now, unfortunately, you can only get 2 points over here as well, and this is Emergency Protection. Emergency Protection makes it so that when you're taking skill damage, you reduce later additional skill damage that you might receive. Okay, there's a chance for that to happen. And unfortunately, I'm just like missing 1 point to put into this. I suppose you could take it from somewhere else. I'll talk about where that could be in just a minute. In addition, you're reducing skill damage taken from loose formation. I will say if you are pairing with Takeda, there might be some funky healing build over here. Whenever you're healed, troops led by this commander have their attack boosted. You could maybe go a route with that. So there may be a Takeda alternate build that you could run. And then this stuff in the cavalry tree is just very, very standard, okay? You always want to go for Emblazoned Shield. Reduce that skill damage taken by 12%. Very good. You're getting the health along the way. You're getting the march speed along the way. We're already going for rage with this commander, so let's just push the bounds a little bit on how much rage we're getting. You want the extra damage against archers. You see a ton of Boudica Prime running all over the field. You want this. And this reduces the attack of your enemy. It's not tankiness exactly, but reducing the enemy's attack does mean you might take a little bit less damage if they're targeting you or they have AoE skill damage that would hit you. Now, in terms of priority, where does Joan fall? You've got Boudica Prime. You've got Nevsky. I mean, these are really, really high power level commanders. You've got Skippy Prime that you also could consider. I mean, there's just a lot of really powerful options now for Open Field and Rise of Kingdoms. Which one do you choose? If we open up the filter to look at all commanders here, it's really tough to say. I will advise you as follows, though. You need to look at what pairings you have. You need to look at what equipment you have. And you decide what is the weakest commander you're taking out of your existing lineup. And what gives you the most gain by bringing in a new legendary commander. Let me explain this more in depth. The 2 ways that I look at my lineup is I say, which commander do I need to remove because they're the weakest? And I try to shuffle things around and then slot in the new commander. Or that second approach is to look at not what's weakest in your lineup, but what you're trying to make really good. So for example, if you've got an E-Song and your current pairing is like El Cid, you might say, okay, I want to go archers. And if you don't have another cavalry commander to pair with Joan Prime, then like maybe it doesn't make sense to go for her just yet. I'm not saying Boudica is better than Joan Prime. What I'm saying is that it depends a lot on what you have and what march you can make. For example, if you're entering Season of Conquest for the very first time and you're like, man, I've got this Minamoto, but, you know, I don't know what I'm going to pair him with. I mean, you could do CC. Alternatively, you might be looking to Nevsky or Joan Prime as one of those first commanders that you go work on that will work really, really well with Minamoto. That would be reasonable. We'll only really know exactly where Joan Prime goes in the pecking order after we start testing with her. And you're not going to want to miss that video, so subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Throw a like on this one as a way of supporting the channel, which is 100% free to play to do. And if you're looking for more information about how exactly Joan Prime works, or my overall tier list for Rise of Kingdoms Legendary Commanders, those cards are going to appear in the end credits in just a minute. That'll be right over here and right over here.